with you all. Throughout the session, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll do our best to address them. We really want to make sure this is super collaborative and engaging for everybody. Before we kick off with our incredible panelists, I do want to take a second to just thank our sponsors, New Mode and their partners, Social Current, New Media Mentors, SoSha, Higher Ground Labs, and New Media Ventures for hosting us in this incredible live stream. It is truly so lovely and appreciated when people bring together our community for such essential discussions. And to New Mode specifically, thank you for providing the advocacy platform that so many of us use to build power and pressure decision makers. If you don't know about New Mode, make sure to check them out at newmode.net. It is really an amazing tool. This event is the next step in the Future Political Engagement Research Project. This is where they're digging into how organizers and campaigns are adapting to a digital landscape that's shifting faster than ever, one where trust and platforms and algorithms and communities are all being tested. And we know that this has created some really turbulent times, but it also has created openings for new forms of connection, creativity, and powerful community building. So today we'll explore what's actually working in the new environment across social, messaging, and emerging platforms, and how we can also keep the people in power responsive to our communities and these platforms. So thank you for showing up today to be part of this really important conversation. And now let's jump right in and introduce our panelists. First, I want you to say hello, please, to Elana Levin. They are a program director at New Media Mentors and director of training at Netroots Nation. Since 2005, Elana has been a digital strategist for labor unions, nonprofits, and grassroots campaigns. Recently, Elana has led training sessions that focus on how nonprofits and unions can get most out of Blue Sky. Please wave and say hello.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks. It's Elana Levin. And if folks are posting along on Blue Sky, which is, I suppose, possible, the handle is Levin.
Thank you. And our other panelist is Tudor Mihailescu. Tudor Mihailescu is a co-founder of SoSha, an AI-powered social amplification platform that helps organizations leverage the social clout of their communities to drive organic social media reach at scale. Tudor has unique data and insights on which platforms are driving engagement right now. Tudor, say hello.
Oh, classic mistake. I was, of course, on mute. Hey, everyone. Great to meet you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we are going to kick us off. Tudor, I'm going to start with a question for you. You have seen countless campaigns experiment across platforms. Which channels right now are driving the most meaningful engagement?
Yeah, so I think one thing to just set the context, there's been a lot of conversation, I think, even over the last year in terms of what's the impact of AI, what's the impact of generative AI search, and so on. And I think that's exciting, and it will bring a lot of change. But at the moment, the biggest change we're seeing is that the main source of news, at least for Americans, it's actually social media. It's for the first time that the tables have switched. And the main way Americans are actually getting their news is actually from social media. And most of that is from people they know sharing news with their networks. This can be influencers, this can be regular people, this can be coworkers, and so on. So just at the macro level, this is the biggest change we're seeing over the last few years, that most political organizations, advocacy organizations, and campaigns actually need to adapt to. I can share a little bit more about what we're seeing at SoSha. So our bread and butter is helping organizations equip their supporters with content so that it makes it easy for these supporters to then share on their own social networks. And we've helped organizations drive around 2 million posts generated by regular people on social media. And wanted to just give you a glimpse of some of the data we're seeing. And one of the, when asking this question about meaningful engagement, I think it's important to distinguish between meaningful engagement for what. And we usually see social media being used for a few different reasons. it's being used to drive click-throughs and conversions, right? So a lot of organizations are trying to drive donations, petition signatures, event signatures, and so on. This is one way. Another way is persuasion, right? So people influencing their friends either to get out the vote, like to go and vote, or to trying to persuade them to vote in a certain way. A third one is just reach, right? So narrative change. How are you on all of these different social networks? And I would say, depending on each objective, the social media strategy is totally different, which is something that folks need to understand and realize. And just to give an example of data, if you look only at what platforms drive the most clicks, we at SoSha have this metric where we're looking at per every share, for every post shared with a link on a platform, how many clicks are being driven through that. And at the moment, the top 3 social networks that drive the most clicks are actually Threads, LinkedIn, and WhatsApp. And I'll get into this much more. Out of these 3, none of them are actually being used in the US that much, by the way. Which is a really interesting thing to think about. A successful social media campaign happens at the nexus of what you as an organization are trying to achieve, what are the most effective channels to drive that, and what your supporters or communities like to use. And that's how I would think about it. For instance, progressives in the US love using Blue Sky a lot. Progressive in Europe love using WhatsApp a lot. Even though I just said Threads is very successful and drive clicks, no one uses Threads for political reasons, right? So it's just like these things need to be taken into account.
Thank you so much for that. I think you said something really interesting, which is that successful campaigns are also really about where your communities and supporters are, which is really key, meeting your audience where they are. Elana, Blue Sky Elana, Blue Sky has emerged as a surprising bright spot for progressive organizers. I would love to hear more from you about what's actually working there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really exciting for folks is the radical difference in feel and tone from leaving Twitter and beginning there. And while there definitely are people who we encounter who weren't on Twitter and are now on Blue Sky, you'll definitely get, for example, some older folks who are mostly on Facebook and then got onto Blue Sky because Rachel Maddow told them to, for example, right? That's like one possible pathway. The tone is so different that it lends itself to a different kind of conversation and feel. And it's important to have a backup plan. And the fact that Blue Sky is federated means that when the mods go haywire and try to sell our souls to, corporate whatever, we still can keep our connections and move them somewhere else, which is something we have not had the ability to do with other platforms. And you could say, yeah, but Mastodon, we have all experienced having blocks among members, even staff, and trying to get them signed up and using and engaged there. So Blue Sky sort of solved the problem of what is not run by a white supremacist and is easy to join. So that's what it became to do. And there are different other kinds of communities that spend time there, but it's definitely not a generalist community. But I want folks to remember that Twitter is not a generalist community ever either. I think a lot of people are like, yeah, but so and so isn't on Blue Sky. I'm like, yeah, but they weren't on Twitter either. Like, unfortunately, we have different people on different platforms, and we have to spend our time in ways that reflect a strategic plan for who we're trying to speak to before we decide where we're spending our time.
That is super helpful, and I totally agree with you, but I do think that there's a lot of questions around how we build a bigger tent. So a quick follow-up for you, Elana, is what about social media spaces where we are meeting non-progressive audiences? And this is coming directly from one of our listeners.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be about where are your members who need to have those conversations already having them again. Instagram is often a place where people from all sides of things end up together because it's sort of based a lot in the home and the family. But I will say that there's plenty of persuasion work that happens on Blue Sky. It just is the persuasion of people who might be too angry to volunteer. Like, can we get you guys to volunteer? We've been able to move you to take action. Are there people like I live in New York, so I'm always thinking about the primary, but I'm like, we have persuasion that we do here too. But definitely, I urge groups to look at what, like, because there's data from Pew. Like, tell me what the demographic is you're trying to reach. Pew survey can probably tell you where they are. So, but we have a real need on the left to also reach left-wing activists to recruit them for activist asks. And Blue Sky is really good for that.
Yeah, and I love what you say about moving people to actually take action because I think there's a lot of questions around, how do you measure impact on social media? Is it reach? Is it virality? What is actually moving people? And so Tudor, I'd love to hear from you. How are organizers balancing reach versus authenticity and measuring virality versus impact on large social media networks?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to piggyback on what Elana said earlier. What we've seen, so in the US at least, the most popular platform, which we measure in terms of how many people are sharing from a platform when they've been given the chance to share on that platform, is actually Facebook. And we haven't mentioned that yet, especially for the older demographics. Facebook is one of the most effective ways to actually reach to people of all political persuasions. And that's something that I think it's worth remembering. What we've seen since Elon Musk bought Twitter is a lot of progressives have left that platform, but there's still plenty of them still there sharing content and basically trying to drive narrative change on a platform that has changed a lot its demographics over the last 2 years. So I wouldn't discount that either as a way to actually to drive engagement, especially for certain communities, right? So techies use X a lot, right? I think it's also important to look at demographics. Speaking of authenticity, I think authenticity can actually look in different ways. So I'll give a couple of examples. When folks are sharing donation asks or petitions, how they do that matters less. Authenticity comes from the fact that they really support this petition or this donation ask, and they've just done that, and they want their friends to do the same. The words don't matter as much there as actually the ask and the fact that they stand behind that ask. And to their friends and connections, the authentic part is, I know someone in my network who's done this, and they're encouraging me to do the same. Just comparing that, I know there were a lot of controversies about influencers who are supporting products that they weren't using themselves, right? So when a regular person is sharing about something that they've just done, right, the authenticity comes from that, right? But there's also, I've seen a lot of other examples of folks trying to create authenticity that's also more creative. So I'll just give a couple of examples. We see a lot of users. Actually, 7% of all of the shares that happen through SoSha are videos. So people take videos that have been created by organizations they care about, and then they build their own posts based on those. Right? So they take an asset, they change it, and then they share that. Or people taking GIFs that they find interesting and then sharing those to make a point, even though those GIFs have been created by something else, but basically adding their own message with it. And it's in our case, it's actually 1% of all of the shares we've driven are actually regular people who create either their own videos or take selfies and they add frames on them. This is probably the highest bar in terms of content creation. But these people are usually trying to, they're taking one step higher on the creativity scale to actually make their point across. All of these ways are authentic in different ways, especially when just regular people are sharing them.
Yeah, and I think the authenticity key point is very key. It is definitely a buzzword lately, that people want authentic messengers and authentic content. But really, what it boils down to is we want messaging and content that breaks through to all the different audiences and people in our tent. And there are so many ways now, more than ever, to do that, and more messengers and people with platforms to do so. Um, and so I do want to take a second and ask both of you some questions from the audience before we dive back in, because I think there's some great ones that come up right in line with that. And one is, what are the best apps that you have seen to reach women and specifically women of color? And we'll let either of you answer.
So I shared a link to the demographic data from the Pew chart, and it's going to depend a bit on the age and things like that. But the main places that are being studied in here even are Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and Twitter being the tail end there. Um, so those are, but again, I would ask, like, okay, that's the demographic, but are you looking to recruit activists? Are you looking to speak to the people who might be not activated but could be ideologically aligned? Like, there's so many other questions that go into where do you want to find folks? Then there also is one that organizations need to think about, which is how are they staffed to create content that's suitable to those platforms? And very often we are not staffed to create video content, even though video content is really important. And you don't need like a sound stage to do it. Talk to camera, but they need to have someone who's comfortable talking to camera and willing to do it in a repeated and strategic way.
Well, that's where creator partnerships can be really strong and a great way to utilize some of the people in the space who are already using their voice in that capacity. If organizations don't have the staffing to do so, creators can be really good partners there. But that being said, Elana, how do you see new platforms changing the way movements build sustained power?
I think that it has to be a lot more directly relationship driven because things have been so destabilized. You need people to know what your group is, but that a lot of what people want to connect with is not so much an organizational logo, it's a person, it's staff person, or it could be an influencer. So while there definitely are nonprofits that I see do great things with their accounts under their account name, very often the best messengers for them are people who are posting as themselves. Um, and but I didn't want to step on Tudor if you had a response about the platform usage question
Yeah.
as well.
So thank you. I don't think there is a blueprint for how you reach a particular demographic in all cases. So I'll give you just two examples. When we are looking at who was sharing content from No Kings and who was clicking on that content, which is people going and learning more about it, we saw that the people sharing were obviously it's the traditional indivisible, right? The demographic, which is women between 40 and 60 years old, mostly suburban, but the people who were actually engaging with their posts were actually much younger. They were 25 to 35, right? So we've actually seen generations engage. Another example that personally fascinates me, we are looking at how content was traveling through SoSha in the run-up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court election in April. And what we saw there was that people tended to engage with content that was shared by someone who looked politically like them. So independents tended to engage folks that were also more independently minded, whereas democratic-leaning voters tended to engage more people who had already made up their minds. So these two examples are just examples to show that it actually depends a lot on the message. It depends on the campaign. And obviously, the content matters a lot too. But yeah, I don't think there's a blueprint for this.
I think that there not being a blueprint is a great answer because I do think we're in this space right now where and so many of us have been really encouraging organizations and principals and candidates and campaigns to experiment and to figure out what works. I think that like posting on different platforms and social media it's a muscle and it's a tool that you have to flex and you have to try and you have to figure out how to use your voice in different platforms and what resonates with your audiences. And so it's good to not have one particular blueprint to follow, but necessarily some guiding principles and tools and tactics that we know are successful, but encourage everyone to find their own voice and their own way to stand out. The online ecosystem is so inundated with an incredible amount of content, and so the best way to stand out is not by copying directly another content or content creator that already exists. I do want to ask you, Tudor, though, because I know you have a lot of expertise in this space, are there any patterns in what types of content formats, text or stories that have sparked deeper supporter action from your users? I know you mentioned that there's a good amount of video sharing, but what other anecdotes can you sort of share in terms of what is helpful for people to base off of?
Yeah, so I can actually also so just before this call, I was looking at, so over the last year, we saw 1.8 million social posts being shared through our platform. The very large majority of that was pretty boring, right? An image with a link. 70%, which is 1.2 million of these posts, were just people sharing an image with a link, asking people to drive action, trying to drive action to a page, right? So this is the main one. Then 14% of all of these posts were actually just images, and 6.8% of these were actually videos. And then 5.7 were videos with a link, right? So if you look at it, 70% image with a link, 40% just an image, and then 11% just videos. Then user-generated content, which is people taking their own videos or selfies with a frame, was 1.3% of all of that.
Very helpful. Thank you. I do want to open it up to one more question in the audience, and then we'll go back to some of the ones that we want to make sure are getting discussed, but open to sort of both of you and whoever wants to jump in. But one that I think really stood out is there any quantifiable data anyone can share on what social channels are driving in real life recruitment? Which channels are most likely to generate donations? Yeah.
I ran an A/B test for Jews for Racial and Economic Justice during the primary, doing some live tweeting and live posting of the debates. Had the same content on Blue Sky and on X. And Blue Sky got excellent engagement, and Twitter did not get engagement, and we had to block people. We had been really doing good on Twitter for a very long time. Like just good exponential growth, solid engagement for a long time, but that has changed. But also think about the audience. Jay Fridge's audience are progressive New York Jews. So, but I can absolutely tell you like the amount of clicks and engagement for people signing up to events, sharing, following along, donating, it's just much higher for us on Blue Sky. That won't be true for every organization, but there's a chance that some of the people here are talking to people who are like the ones I just described. But it was such a dramatic difference. And like Threads, you might as well have just been talking to a wall, but they also didn't have as much of a legacy on Threads. So the stronger test was between X because historically we had done very well there. I think the test people should ask is like, if you are still doing well on that platform, if it's still serving you, then that's a valuable space to be. But if your performance has gone down and the harassment has gone up, then that's a hostile place and you're not reaching your intended audience. Like if you're doing posts and all you're getting back from people are slurs, even if you're blocking, like I don't think that that's going to get you good conversions. But there are other orgs that, are still getting a non-Nazi response, then that's suitable to you. So it's going to be individuated, and all of these decisions are going to depend on how your group is doing and what you're seeing.
I like your framing of a non-Nazi response because unfortunately that really is what a lot of comment sections look like. It's tough out there, but I do think it also raises a really important note that engagement isn't necessarily your content breaking through or reaching the right people, and need to think really thoughtfully because so many organizations are so strapped on staffing and resources and time allotment. If the platforms that you're on is breaking into and breaking through or reaching an audience where they are really receiving your messaging and learning from the work that you're putting out there. Um, Elana, I want to ask you, what's the biggest misconception campaigners still have about using social platforms for political engagement? What have you seen people continually do wrong?
I think there are people who still think that you can just show up when you need people and leave it fallow the rest of the time, and that's not true. Even if you yourself don't have the steam to generate an ongoing campaign there, you can always at least boost friends and allies because then that makes them more likely to boost and support you. Um, and then they will, and your field will be ready. You'll be ready for other folks to see it. I mean, because there isn't an algorithm in Blue Sky, there is less of a, you are less penalized for being inactive there for a long stretch. It's not driven by algorithm. It's basically anybody who follows you is going to see your content if they go and look on that tab. What an amazing thing. But for things like Instagram and all that are algorithmically driven, if you go missing, it's not going to populate. So think about how you can be a good ally and partner with other groups who are serving and reaching similar audiences, similar people, to make sure that you're not letting anything go fallow. I see groups that aren't monitoring their mentions. The thing that makes me want to scream is all of these boards of health are posting important information about vaccinations, and all of their comments are anti-vaxxers. And these are ads that they are spending money on. So that means that the New Jersey Department of Health is spending money to promote an anti-vaxxers because they have taken over the comments and they haven't moderated them. So you need to keep an eye on what's happening on your content and you need to moderate, like, especially if you're spending money.
Absolutely. And I love what you say about people don't want to show up until they need somebody. I think, the phrase comes to my mind into where it's like everyone wants a village, but no one wants to be a villager. But really using
Mm.
online organizing is grassroots organizing because this is where people are nowadays. And grassroots organizing is so successful because you know the people in your community. It's best done when the community knows you. And so it is the same as building a community, investing in your online community, making people know that you're there for them. And so that was such an important anecdote. Thank you for sharing that advice. Tudor, this is one that we had talked about, but also that has come up in the comment section here a good amount, and we're trying to keep up with it. I love how engaged everybody is what role do messaging apps like WhatsApp play or Signal for scaling engagement compared to social media and also for messaging, since it has really become such a way that people communicate?
Yeah, and I can link to this to the other question
Right.
before about what quantifiable metrics we can give on what drives engagement. So we around 50% of our usage at SoSha is from the US, and the rest is from Europe, Canada, and a little bit of Australia. And so there's a couple of things, right? When asking what are the platforms that can be used, for instance, for fundraising or event signups and so on, it's the platforms that drive the most clicks. And as I said, we need to look here at the nexus of what are the most popular platforms in a community, which is where do people share the most versus are those platforms good at driving clicks? And for the US, the answer is the top three most used platforms are in terms of sharing progressive content or with political messages are the most popular ones are Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram, but only Facebook and Blue Sky actually drive clicks. So Blue Sky is actually 3 times more effective than Instagram at driving clicks. And Blue Sky edges a little bit Facebook in terms of click-through rates. That being said, around the world, and this I'm saying mostly Europe. In Europe, the best platform for organizing and sharing content is WhatsApp by far. It's also much better at driving clicks than Facebook and Blue Sky. The problem I'm seeing in the US, and I hope folks hear it, is the reason why we don't see that many shares on WhatsApp in the US is because organizations do not invest in organizing on WhatsApp. Actually, everyone else but white Americans use WhatsApp a lot in the US to speak to their friends, especially folks who are part of diaspora communities or they're first generation Americans. They use WhatsApp a lot. I actually see, unfortunately, progressive organizations in the US are not well equipped to actually run relational organizing programs on WhatsApp at scale or to encourage sharing at scale. It works everywhere else. I think it's time for progressives to actually to integrate WhatsApp and Signal and also the other platforms in their toolbox for organizing.
But as somebody else, oh, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Jump in.
But as somebody else was mentioning in here, the thing with WhatsApp and Signal is they really are for talking to people you know. And so when groups, generally speaking, have an idea of, well, we'll make a page and we'll broadcast it to people, that's literally not possible in these other ways. So you have to have, it's a different strategy that you can't just copy it over. It's not the same thing.
I do want to say I love what you said, Tudor, though, because we have to be investing in new strategies, but also where people are communicating. The AAPI community is a great example of people who are doing incredible relational organizing in the United States on WhatsApp, because that is the platform where so many of the members of their communities are on. And that is how you have conversations that actually connect. And so we have to be thinking beyond reaching white Americans in the platforms where white Americans are on, and how we grow and adjust our strategies to make sure that we're reaching different communities. And I do have to say, I see the question, which US org, there's so many, but I think the AAPI communities are doing really incredible relational organizing online. I can put some examples of organizations in the chat who are doing it in WhatsApp. But what I do think those orgs are doing is they are putting their community leaders in charge of relational organizing rather than the organizations themselves. So we don't know best on how to reach every community in this country. And there's so many platforms and there's so many different people. And so how do we empower people who are values aligned with us to lead the strategies that are going to reach their communities the best on the platforms that are going to reach their communities the best, and make sure they are given the resources that they need to do that in a successful way, because we don't know the best way to reach everybody. So that's my little tidbit on there. But I love hearing you mention WhatsApp and the need for US to really step up on applications like WhatsApp. Elana, we all know offline and online engagement are not and cannot be at odds with each other when we're thinking about coalition building, when we're thinking about the work that we're doing. And so I want to ask you if you've seen any great examples of people who are using social platforms and offline events together effectively.
I had a panel at Netroots Nation with folks from the Zoran Mamdani campaign, and they really have been doing amazing work in integrating those. For one thing, having a creative and compelling in its own right in-person gathering that you've promoted on social, like you can drive people to go to it because it looks like it's fun. And then you've created social media content from having done that event and feeding it back onto the digital platform. But they also literally were processing people's questions. And it wasn't the kind of account where you would say something and it would go to a void. Like you could be connected to real actions and with volunteering. There were these wonderful independent groups that started of volunteers like Hot Girls for Zoran, which anyone, as they would say, anyone can be a hot girl. And like plenty of hot girls included people of all different colors, shapes, sizes, and genders. But the idea was to kind of be a fun, playful, like it's based on a meme essentially. Anyway, they ran their own events and actually recruited and sold so many t-shirts they had to start their own pack because they had, so I think that like, and I don't think the fact that it was about an electoral campaign precludes the abilities of organizations when they have a moment where their issue is ripe in the zeitgeist, in the conscience, when people are like looking for some way to help people about a particular issue, to jump in there and be creative too. And having, a narrative strategy where you're engaging with pop culture communities to reach audiences that are aligned with you ideologically, but might not be activated to taking political action is another piece of that too. I was working with the folks at Get Free on a campaign organizing Star Wars fans around Andor, and we were like doing a lot of direct education and like popular education to Star Wars fans. And then Nalini Stamp and the folks that she works with announced the Disney boycott and Disney action, and we were like, oh, we have people we can send to you for that because they'd been activated and educated through this. But this was all through a campaign that was very much online first. We worked with content creators. We hired a content creator who's like a lefty activist who's a Star Wars fan, and not, we worked together putting together newsletters and creating content and reaching out to people to build that education presence and the connections and legitimacy in those communities. So it takes footwork to get it done. And I think that one of my gripes is historically, because I've been trying to do this stuff for over a decade. If you told your employer that you wanted to do some cultural campaigning as part of your work, they'd be like, oh, that's so nice. You want to have a hobby. And I'm like, no, actually, this is part of my core work because we're trying to speak to people where they are, and where they are is not on our website. Where they are is in other places talking about things they love. And I'm glad to see more organizations realizing that that's a strategy they can pursue. And definitely shout out Nalini and WFP for really being groundbreaking there too.
No, this is incredible. And I think that the cultural element is so important. I also love Megan's comment on suggesting that more orgs use Eventbrite, because I do think that finding these fun new ways to engage offline and online communities and the things that we love in real life with politics or the orgs or issues that we're advocating for is so, so important. I want to plug an event that I am working on currently that I think is actually like really, really aligned with this topic. If you guys don't follow the We Are the 3.5% page, go do that. But we're hosting the first ever day of remote resistance next Monday, in line with the idea or in line with the healthcare premiums going to double on November 1st. But the idea is gathering together in a community Zoom where we can all see each other and help going through a quick brief training, and then helping to amplify vetted pieces of content that do a really good job storytelling and messaging on the issue, so that we're engaging online, but while we're all together in community. And I think it's a really, really cool idea. It's called a social bank, like a phone bank. So if people are around, they should totally sign up. I hope to see you there. But I want to ask, one of the questions that I've seen in here that is getting multiple reactions asked to be talked about is, if Facebook ads get a lot of opponents commenting, is it best to block, delete, or hide? And I am not a Facebook expert by any means, so I'm going to open it up and just see if either of you have any responses.
Like if you are engaging with people who are hostile, then continuing to engage with them will drive more hostile people to you. So blocking and hiding is there. There may be some other case. This is going to be individually, but to the logic of the cases that I've worked on, it made sense to hide those people because we don't want to encourage them. We're trying to reach people who we want to engage with us. So also looking, revising your targeting can be part of that as well. I miss the old days where I could filter on a Facebook ad to only target people who watch certain TV shows that like really gave me a sense of what their cultural orientation was. I had so much targeting for anyway, but the point is, but yeah, like if you let people who hate you go wild, because like Facebook, it doesn't care that you're getting bad engagement. It's just like, oh, you're getting engagement.
Tudor, do you have anything to add on that one?
Not on that one specifically, but I did wanna. I saw someone in the chat ask about what are the social platforms that are most popular for sharing political and progressive content in Canada. And the top three, I was looking at the stats, at least from SoSha, are Facebook. Twitter is still quite popular in Canada, even among progressives. It's actually the second most popular platform, and Instagram is third. Blue Sky is the fourth one, so we definitely see penetration in Canada as well.
And Tudor, I want to ask you, as we're coming to sort of close to the end of this, is if you could give one piece of advice to campaigners struggling with low online engagement, what would it be so that everyone could walk away with a good nugget here?
Yeah, and I've actually seen this also in the comments. So for a very long time, so organic social media meant organizations will build pages on multiple social networks and they will post there as much as possible and then drive engagement. That doesn't work anymore, right? So a few people were scratching their heads in the comments thinking, okay, well, but on WhatsApp, we cannot broadcast to people. How do we do that? How do we engage? Well, the what we're seeing that works very well is instead of organizations trying to set up shop on all of the platforms where they think their supporters are, equipping your supporters and your communities with the right messages and with the right frameworks for them to spread the word about what you do. How that works on WhatsApp, indeed, yes, you as an organization cannot reach people on WhatsApp easily, but your supporters can, right? Actually, everyone is in 5 or 10 or 15 groups with soccer moms or people who they know from abroad, people where they're sharing recipes, right, in small groups. Being able to actually give your supporters the right content for them to share links and information in those groups that only they are part of is a very powerful tactic, but it requires shifting the framework from finding new places to broadcast to actually building community and giving your supporters an easy way to then amplify your content wherever they're having their conversations, which is actually what the definition of offline organizing is. It's just it can be brought to online, right? So
Yeah, like there's so many people who, because of accessibility issues, because they have small children, because of the ongoing pandemic, like they're not going to be doing fields in a traditional way. And if you can show people that having them lead these online conversations with their friends and their relationships in real online relational organizing between themselves and people in their lives, that's hugely valuable. But people haven't been told that. So like when I have asks for people about that, I'm in where I am leading a webinar series on meaningful online organizing and mobilization that kicks off on Wednesday. But when I have these asks for folks, I tell you like you need to explain to your list why you're asking them to do this and that it's not BS because they've been told that being asked to do something online is meaningless. And we're like, no, no, it's real. So let's explain to you why and how. So give them that pep talk.
And I think that also leads to something that I'm constantly talking about, which is having a CTA in your social content because it's so easy to produce content or hold yourself to a consistent content calendar or try to be producing. But what is the ask? Like what can people do if they're locked in as a community and still having that CTA that you would have in on the ground grassroots organizing with a lot of your content is super helpful in engaging people. Tudor, something also that you mentioned about the different chats and being in the mom soccer chat and all the different things that sparked something in me is the intergenerational component that is so important. Can you, if your content's reaching predominantly younger people or predominantly older people, can you provide prompts or discussions for them to have at the kitchen and dining room table and bring that content offline and into the home and intergenerationally, where a lot of the mind changing actually happens. So I think that's really awesome. Uh, Elana, looking forward, what is giving you hope about civic engagement online right now during an era of just sort of a lot of chaos and negativity?
Yes, this is very true. I will say that it's been demonstrated to us that many people don't like the way things are. They are not comfortable at the Nazi bar. They don't want to keep being in those spaces. And so it gives me hope that we will be able to continue to talk to people in other places because they care enough. I was one of the last people to like stop being active. I mean, there's people still active on Instagram, I'm sorry, on X, but I was like a late leaver. So I totally get that. And certainly don't delete your account because somebody will impersonate you. Don't delete. But it's been edifying to see how much more I've been able to grow in other places. Additionally, I think we have an opportunity to learn from a lot of young people and different kinds of voices who've been excluded from nonprofit work and work in our industry when we start looking at who are creators on TikTok, who we can talk with, who we can work with. Like there's so many amazing disabled voices, for example, on these social media platforms where nonprofits haven't really developed good skill set. So like that's an interesting and promising way for us to bring new wisdom and energy and like hire people who have those experiences and pay them and have them do that work.
Absolutely. I want to spend a few minutes answering some more of the questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to throw them out and either of you jump in with your expertise. So the first one is there any evidence of social media fatigue on platforms right now? I feel like we're probably feeling it, but is there more evidence than our feelings?
I mean, you can have data. Are people not engaging? Then they have fatigue. If they have fatigue and they're there anyway, then it's about how do you stand out and come off as authentic and meaningful and like not cheap and not, you know, by cheap, I mean like, I'm just here to ask you for something. I'm not here to give you anything. Um,
Yeah.
and Haley, I mean, actually, I was wanted to ask you about what you've seen like as a creator, like how have orgs approached you successfully? Like what has worked well?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking. I think the most successful campaigns that I have seen are when there's sort of a sustained partnership between the creator and the organization, both because we talked about that authenticity element at the beginning of this call, but you know, it seems paid or non-organic or non-authentic if you work with a creator one off who never talks about a political item or hasn't talked about your work before and just goes in and posts about it once and doesn't revisit it for starters. But two, it also takes a long time to become a really good messenger on complex topics or on issues that are values based and really prevalent right now. And
Mhm.
so allowing creators to perfect that messaging over time for it to become authentic to their audience and also to work in partnership with what works and what doesn't work, not telling creators exactly what to say, but rather giving them message it, like some guiding work and research to work around, but trust that they have an audience because they know how to talk to that audience,
Mhm.
um, is super helpful. It always comes off really horrible and like doesn't perform well when we're told to read a script exactly how you want. And my biggest thing is to view creators as partners where you can and not like a billboard for hire, but how can we be strategic brain partners on helping to get your message to break through? Um, and I love working with organizations who want to do that. Okay. One other question that I want to make sure we ask is I've seen this twice now is where are the journalists going from print, radio, and TV media? They used to be on Twitter. Did they move to Blue Sky? Where are you seeing them? It's really important when they're pushing out things they want to get connected to media.
It's going to depend on the beat that they're carrying. In New York, people adopted Blue Sky more slowly than I thought they would, but they are there now. Certainly, journalists who are in populations that are likely to be harassed on X are less likely to be on X. Some people are posting and not reading there. So, like, if you're like, well, look, this reporter's still on X, but they're not engaging with anybody, they're not actually reading there because they don't want to deal with the Nazis in their mentions. So, a lot of those folks, may be elsewhere. But for all I know, the Cleveland local media folks may be on Threads. I wouldn't know because I haven't tried to reach that particular audience yet. So I want you to sit down with a list of here's our dream targets. Here's the electeds, bleh. Here's the reporters and journalists who we care about and like look for them because you have to know who you want to speak to. In some cases, it's also going to be, oh, they have a Substack. I guess I have to subscribe to it and comment, which you're not going to do for everybody because are you made of money? No. But if there's like if there's this one person who just like covers your issue so well and you want to get in front of them, well, one, like pitch them the old-fashioned way, and maybe you just subscribe to that person's Substack and give them a ping on it, you know.
I think that's great. Tudor, do you have anything to add on that one?
Not on journalists. I just wanted to bring up one point about social media fatigue. So social media is also direct messaging platforms, right? So there's multiple types of people and how they consume content. There's people who maybe because of what's happening in the US and in other, they may not want to post publicly anymore, but they still consume content, right? There's other folks who may not want to post publicly, but they are very engaged with sharing content with trusted friends. And there may be people who just because it's a difficult time right now, they're mustering up their courage to actually become public and be public about certain issues, right? So it's like fatigue can come in so many different forms.
It truly can. This hour has gone so quickly, and I feel like we could keep talking forever on this topic, but I do want to make sure that we have time for our panelists to leave us with some final remarks or thoughts. Elana, if you want to kick us off on closing remarks, then we'll hear from you, Tudor.
Yes, I mentioned it. I'll mention it again. I mostly I'm not just sitting on panels. I lead trainings in digital strategy, including narrative strategy. And thank you for posting the leave again, Steve Anderson. My training series kicks off on Wednesday. If your organization is such that you are not going to be able to get clearance to register for it in time on Wednesday, drop me a note. I'm going to have, well, one, the trainings are recorded, so we'll get you the recording and you can catch up with it, but we'll figure out a way to get you in, even if you're a little bit late. I I just get so many emails that are sent to me that are fully cynical and just they make people think that online organizing isn't a real thing. And online organizing, as I think we're talking about here, like is real. We just need to help organizations develop a strategy on how to do it in a way that actually makes sense and is rooted in theory of change, in understanding your audiences, in ladder of engagement. If terms like ladder of engagement, you know, like what your appetite, like come on. And if it doesn't, because you don't know what it is, then definitely come on. But yeah, this is training for organizations, unions, grassroots groups. Would love to see folks in it. Because every time I get an email that tells me like send a message to Donald Trump, he doesn't care what I say. Like that's not an actionable, believable thing, and it only makes people cynical of you and not believe that they should do anything with you. So we'll find you some things you can ask people to do that are real.
Thank you for organizing that. That sounds so exciting. Tudor?
Yeah, Steve was messaging me about something we've had a conversation about, which is one platform that I feel is overlooked is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is one of the most generous platforms in terms of driving clicks. And to the other question about journalists, journalists are on LinkedIn. If there is a platform where you can be sure most journalists are, it's on LinkedIn. And there can be very successful advocacy campaigns done on LinkedIn if they're done right. So just an example, one of the ones that stuck with me was after Roe versus Wade was overturned, Planned Parenthood did this one campaign where they asked everyone to stop working at, I think it was 3 p.m. on a Thursday or something, just to protest against it. And that was one of the most successful advocacy campaigns we've seen at SoSha over the last 4 years. Like people just posting, this is work related. If you work on any labor issues or any issues that have any connection with work in one way or another, LinkedIn is a great platform to work on. The other thing I'll just say is I think we're living in a time when it's worth thinking outside of the box. I saw folks being asking Jessica about Reddit tips in the notes. Yeah, other platforms to take into account are Discord, and so on. So like now is the time to think outside of the box and then find communities where they are, and that involves exploring multiple platforms.
Truly great advice. There are so many platforms to explore and figure out where the best places to meet your communities. I just want to take a second to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day on a Monday afternoon to join us. There was almost 200 of you on this call, which fills my heart with optimism on the future of the work that we all do. I really want to take a minute to thank our panelists for their incredible insights. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and advice with all of us. And thank you again to New Mode for bringing us all together for this really important discussion. Everybody, please keep an eye out for some resources on the subject that New Mode and other past partners will pass along for signing up. And I know Steve has dropped some in the chat as well. So thank you all. It's been such a pleasure to chat with everybody today.
And thanks for moderating, Haley.
Yes, thank you so much.
Of course. All right. Have a good Monday.